Introduction to Calculating Emissions. This video is designed to assist viewers understand the basics of potential to emit and calculating emissions. In Kansas, the KDHE Bureau of Air is the authority that monitors, regulates, and permits air emission sources and activities through the state's EPA-approved State Implementation Plan, or SIP, and through adoption of some federal air quality rules and interpretations. Resources on regulations, permitting, emission inventory, monitoring, planning, and public notices for permits, regulations, and other actions can be found on their webpage. The video, Introduction to Air Pollutants, identifies the criteria pollutants, VOCs, and HAPs that are the regulated pollutants. In this video, we will discuss potential to emit and actual emissions. Understanding what chemicals or compounds are regulated air pollutants is the first step to understanding how to calculate air emissions at your facility. Before you can calculate the emissions of any process, you must understand the process and what regulated pollutants may be emitted from the process. You will need to know about the emission unit or process. This could include manufacturer's information such as fuel fired, horsepower, maximum rating of burners, operational specifications, maximum rated throughputs, or process temperatures. The material composition from a safety data sheet can be useful for some emission calculations. Calculating PTE can be simple or very complex. Examples of simple calculations include calculating the combustion emissions from a boiler, dryer, or engine, or calculating VOC and HAP emissions from painting and coating of metal parts. Examples of complex calculations include calculating the emissions from incinerating municipal solid waste or chemical processing and manufacturing. Because of the wide range of complexity, this video will focus on the simpler types of air emission calculation methods and discuss a couple of the emission calculator tools available through the K-State Small Business Environmental Assistance Program website. The most important emission calculation that can be performed is the potential to emit, or PTE, calculation for individual emission units, emission processes, or facility-wide. PTE is the basis for all permitting actions and for regulatory applicability. For example, the PTE of facility-wide hazardous air pollutants can be used to determine if a facility is subject to a National Emission Standard for Hazardous Air Pollutants, or NESHAP, under EPA's 40 CFR Part 63. Potential to emit is defined in the Kansas Air Quality Regulations at KAR 2819-200YY, and it means the maximum capacity of a stationary source to emit a pollutant under its physical and operational design. Any physical or operational limitation on the capacity of the source to emit a pollutant, including air pollution control equipment and restrictions on hours of operations, or on the type or amount of material combusted, stored, or processed, shall be treated as part of its design if the limitation or the effect it would have on emissions is federally enforceable. Secondary emissions shall not be considered in determining the potential to emit of a stationary source. So what does this mean? In most cases, PTE is evaluated on worst case or maximum potential operations. This means the units or process are evaluated uncontrolled at 8,760 hours per year. Or, in other words, your emission units or processes are evaluated as if they are operating full out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, without controls or restrictions. Every facility in Kansas should know their facility-wide potential to emit as well as their actual emissions. Identifying methods to calculate the PTE. The list below is a general hierarchy of best to least preferred methods for calculating the facility emissions. CEMS. Continuous emission monitoring data from an emission unit can be used to calculate PTE as well as demonstrate actual emissions. CEMS data from another unit that is similar or a duplicate unit may be used to calculate PTE if permission to use the data has first been obtained from the KDHE Bureau of Air. Stack test. Stack testing data, also known as performance testing data, can be used to calculate PTE as well as demonstrate actual emissions. Stack test data from another unit that is similar or a duplicate unit may be used to calculate PTE if permission to use the data has first been obtained from the KDHE Bureau of Air. Material balance is specific to certain types of operations, such as painting, solvent usage, or chemical processing and manufacturing. This method relies on safety data sheets or other scientific information about chemical reactions or volatility and annual usage that helps establish an emission rate or factor for the emission unit or process. To learn more about how to use safety data sheets to identify air pollutants in your materials, please see the video P2 and Understanding Safety Data Sheets on the K-State Pollution Prevention Institute or PPI YouTube channel. Emission factors. The US EPA has emission factors available for numerous types of industrial processes. These factors are located on their website under WebFire and AP42 Catalog of Emission Factors. These factors are used frequently, and particularly when more accurate emission factors for a process are unavailable. However, many of the AP42 factors are relatively old and do not have high accuracy. Emission factors are also available for some processes from industry or trade associations and from manufacturers of equipment. Emission factors are used to calculate the hourly, 24-hour, and annual emissions expected to be emitted from the process or unit. These hourly, 24-hour, and annual emission rates are then compared against emission thresholds in the Kansas Air Quality Regulations that determine the types of permits that will be needed. Currently, K-State Small Business Environmental Assistance Program, or SBEP, has several Excel spreadsheets that are designed to calculate the potential to emit from common processes in industry. This includes PTE calculators for painting and coating, welding, abrasive blasting, plasma or laser cutting, boilers, furnaces, and dryers, engines, air curtain combustors, grain elevators, and hemp processing. Let's look at an example. When evaluating the PTE of a boiler, you will need to identify the fuel that will be fired and the maximum heat rating for the boiler per the manufacturer. So if the boiler can burn both natural gas and fuel oil, you will assume for PTE purposes that the boiler will fire the most polluting fuel year-round, which would be the fuel oil. In this example, we will calculate the PTE based on 600 horsepower at 8,760 hours per year. However, boiler efficiency counts. So if manufacturer data indicates that this boiler is rated at 600 horsepower with an 80% efficiency rating, you will need to calculate the emissions based on that efficiency rating. When we talk about considering actual hours of operation, actual process throughputs, or control device efficiencies, those normally do not apply to calculating the PTE. Your actual emissions do factor in when determining the types of permits that will be needed or any restrictions that will be included in a permit. For the 600 horsepower boiler that is rated at 80% efficiency, we can use the calculator to convert the horsepower to million BTU per hour. 600 horsepower at 80% efficiency equals 25.8 million BTU per hour. At 100% efficiency, the 600 horsepower boiler would have a heat rating of 20.07 million BTU per hour. Using the 20.07 million BTU per hour in the calculations would result in less emissions. Therefore, for PTE purposes, the manufacturer's information on efficiency must be used to calculate the worst case emissions from the boiler. This tool will calculate the emissions based on the boiler or furnace type chosen and the number of units chosen for that million BTU rating. The calculator also allows you to add in numerous units that you have at your facility. So if you have several boilers and several dryers and several furnaces, you would be able to calculate all of the PTE for each one of the units and as an aggregate on this calculator tool. Let's look at how to calculate emissions from painting and coating operations. K-State SBEEP has an Excel spreadsheet for painting and coating. In this example, the facility uses 300 gallons of red paint annually. The facility paints on one shift or 2,080 hours per year. Painters use high volume, low pressure guns or HVLP guns. The SDS says the paint contains 25% ethyl benzene, 10% xylene, 10% toluene, and the remainder is 55% of a solid component. The product info tab in our spreadsheet allows you to enter each paint or coating, the annual usage for each painting and coating, and the information about the chemical composition from the safety data sheet, while entering the percentage of each chemical listed in the SDS that is either a HAP or a VOC. Total solids are calculated based on 100 minus the percent VOC. This spreadsheet has a tab that lists the hazardous air pollutants, or HAPs. So if you aren't sure whether a chemical listed in your SDS is a HAP, you can use the Chemical Abstract System Number, or CAS number, minus the dashes to look up HAP chemicals in this table. The Summary tab lists the PTE emissions based on the annual usage that has been extrapolated to 8,760 hours. These are indicated in red. The Summary tab also calculates actual emissions based on a 12-month period and based on the annual usage. The Summary tab has a place to enter the transfer efficiency of the paint gun and the hours of operation at the facility. You can also enter whether the facility is located in Wyandotte or Johnson counties here in Kansas, as KDHE has a VOC regulation applicable to sources in those counties. As previously mentioned, K-State has several emission calculator tools on its website. The National SBEEP website has links to emission calculators developed by other states that may be useful for evaluating PTE or actual emissions from other processes that K-State SBEEP does not yet have a calculator developed. For assistance calculating your air emissions, K-State Small Business Environmental Assistance Program provides free and confidential technical assistance to small businesses in Kansas. If you are a small business in another state, please contact your state SBEEP. Additional information can be found on the National SBEEP website.